Hey guys, Mr. Gibson here. So for this activity, this is your first hook for Unit 2, and it's called the Genetic Book of Life. So if you remember last unit, there was an activity called Make Me a Sandwich where you had to make an analogy, or there was an analogy already made, rather, about a kid who needed a sandwich and all this stuff, and each part of the analogy related to the actual way that proteins get made, the actual steps and cell structures involved in protein synthesis. Now, this activity is much simpler than that activity, so don't freak out. But it is using an analogy, and you're actually going to do two things today. You're going to assign each part of your genome or all of your genetic information to each part of a book, how a book is built. Okay, so a book is your analogy today. Something we're really familiar with in real life that will help us understand something abstract or hard to understand a little bit better. And then you're actually going to make your own analogy. Okay, so let's get into what this is actually going to have you do really quickly. So it says first, open the attached Google slide and follow the directions on the second slide to correctly match up the parts of your genome to the parts of the book that would represent them. Then copy and paste both slides into your notebook, and that's going to be part of your notebook grade. So let's open this up. So here is what's going on this first slide here. When it loads, this is a picture of your genome. So your genome here is just all of your genetic information. And then your genome is made up of chromosomes, which is made up of DNA, which is made up of genes, which is used to make proteins, and those proteins then give your cells their traits or their functions, okay? So here we have something big and broad like the genome being broken down into smaller and smaller parts. Well, if you go over here are your instructions. It says, what if your genetic information was a book? Below are cards with each structure that makes up your genetic information. Those are the cards in blue. And cards that represent each part of a book, those are the cards in orange here, okay? So you're going to drag the blue cards around next to the parts of the book that represent it in the analogy. And it should say use, fix that here, the picture on the first slide for help if you get stuck. And so just as an example, what part of your book would represent an individual gene? So that's what you're really trying to figure out here, is what part of a book might, if you're using an analogy, might represent each part of your genome. And so I'm actually, for watching the video, going to help you out here. So these can all be dragged around and moved, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so here we go. Remember, your genome is the whole thing. It's all of your genetic information. So what is all of the information over here? Well, it's the whole book. So your genome would match up with the book. You can have them overlap, you can have them just right next to each other, right? And so the book can be broken down into chapters, and then sentences, and then words, and then letters, and your genome can be broken down into smaller things as well. And so what you're going to do is then relate each part of your genome as it gets smaller and smaller and smaller to each part of the book, just by dragging them next to each other, okay? And it doesn't have to be exactly like that. You can completely overlap them. You can have them one on top of the other. It doesn't really matter to me how you do that, just so long as you are putting what you think, okay? Let me get all that back to normal. All right, so there's that part of the activity. So that's part one. Shouldn't take you more than a few minutes. And then going back to the instructions, it says, then open the attached PDF with Cami, read the information, and create text boxes to fill in the chart at the bottom. You're going to fill in each part for the book analogy, and then you're going to make up your own analogy to represent each part of your genome. So let's open that and see what's going on here. So here we have this information that's just talking about your genome and your genes and all this stuff. Really helpful to read that. And then here we have each part of your genome and blank spaces for the book analogy. So you're going to open this with Cami. And all you're going to do is, for how you match them up on here, you're going to go in here and tell me how you match them up. So for example, I told you that I matched the genome with the whole book. So I'm going to type the word book in there. Remember, you got to select text box. You do whatever color you want. Something other than black, it helps me a lot, but it doesn't. If you're like really set on using black, that's okay. So there's that, and then you would put what you thought the chromosome was represented by, what you without the DNA strand, the genes, the nitrogen bases, all the other cards you match them up with, you're going to type them here. Then the fun starts. Then you're going to make your own analogy. So if you want to say, I think your genetic information is like a city, and I think that the whole city is a genome and the cars are your genes, I don't know. You have full creative freedom here to come up with your own analogy other than a book. For if you're trying to think of it this way, if you're trying to explain these words and how they're related to somebody, what analogy might you use? Would you use a city? Would you use a factory? Would you use a school? Would you use your house? A computer? I've had tons of different creative things over the years of kids coming up with their own analogies for this. So you have full creative freedom. I'm just excited to see what you come up with, okay? So once you're done with that, you will turn this in for a grade for your hook assignment. All right, if you guys need any help, let me know. Good luck.